Hey, Book Dragons. It is your girl, Lindsay, with the Spine Bookshop. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Spine Bookcast, Chronicles of a Bookshop. Today, I have someone who's kind of become my friend, I think. I discovered him through the author Carrie Jones, but his name is Steven Wedel, and he has written a host of books, tons of them. One of which was with Carrie Jones, which is how I got to meet him. So, Stephen, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I'm doing pretty good.
Good.
Actually, Carrie and I have written several books. Two of them have been published so far.
Yeah. I know that I met you on the one book. Oh gosh, now I can't think of it because I've read so many.
Probably In the Woods.
Yeah, In the Woods. That's it. I read that one. And then are you guys doing a sequel to that one?
We are, and it's pretty much ready to go.
Yay!
I just need Carrie to set up an account to split the royalties.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's get
I feel like it is.
Go ahead.
I feel like this sequel to In the Woods is probably the best book we've written together.
I'm so excited because I love that book so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's get into it. How did you get into reading?
Oh, that would be my mom.
Yeah.
Some of my earliest memories were sitting on the couch with her and reading books like A Pickle for a Nickel and The Teddy Bear Twins. Yeah, not really horror stuff.
No.
We would read those over and over until I could read them myself.
That's amazing.
And it's interesting because she dropped out of school in the 8th grade. So she had a limited education, but she felt that reading was very important. And she always had a book she was reading.
I love that.
And definitely instilled that in me. Oh, yeah.
I love that. I think that's amazing. So what was your favorite childhood book?
Without doubt, it was Where the Red Fern Grows.
God, I love it.
I read that book so many times.
It is such a good
I actually wrote to the author.
You what?
Yes. I wrote to the author a couple of times, and unfortunately, I've lost those letters, but I do still have the signed book plates he sent me.
Really?
And
I mean, that.
Yeah. He told me little details like little Anne did not actually win the beauty contest.
Oh, really?
But they did win the hunt and got the gold cup.
I love that book.
Yeah, I mean, I was in probably late grade school or early junior high when I wrote to him.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he wrote back at all was a shock.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, that's how I met Carrie, is because I messaged her about one of her books, and I nearly died when I realized she wrote me back. And now we're good friends. So I'm honored that I love it when authors actually take that time to write their fans back when their fans are showing appreciation. They take that minute to go, thank you so much. And I'm so happy that you love that book, because I love that community of readers and writers together.
Yes. I mean, unless you're at like Stephen King level, it's so easy to just take a couple seconds and just thank the fan who writes to you.
Yeah. Well, I totally appreciate the fact that I discovered you through In the Woods. And In the Woods is such a good book. And if I remember correctly, you told me when we did the book club a couple years ago that you would write a chapter and Carrie would write a chapter, and then you'd write a chapter and Carrie would write a chapter, which I just think is a crazy way to write a book. How did that work out?
Writing with Carrie is the most fun I've ever had writing books.
Yeah.
We start with just kind of a vague outline of where we're going.
Sure.
And we try to one up each other at the end of every chapter. So I'll try to leave her on a big cliffhanger, and then she'll try to leave me on a bigger cliffhanger.
I love that.
Yeah, it is so much fun.
I think that's hilarious because I think that's a really interesting way to write a book because you're not sure what the other person is going to do. And then you get the chapter and then you have to kind of, okay, so now what am I going to do? And so like in the bookshop, one of my writers, Lloyd, he is going to put a typewriter in my bookshop with paper in it. Yeah. So that people can come in and just write on it, whatever they want. And then the next person can come in, read what they wrote, and then add to it if they want.
I love that.
Hopefully we're going to be able to have a really interesting story come out of it.
Yes.
Don't you love dogs? They're always picking stuff up off the floor. Yes, my dogs feature in the podcast on a regular basis.
Oh, yeah. I had a dog under my desk, but I guess she's moved on.
I have two over here, and one of them is harassing the other one.
No.
And so I'm constantly going, quit it. So what's, besides Where the Red Fern Grows, what is one of your other favorite books?
From childhood or just in general?
Just in general.
Charles Dickens' David Copperfield is probably one of my absolute favorites. Yes.
You're the first person I think that I've ever heard say those two authors. Why? I say that no insult to either one of those authors. They just have never been one of my favorites, but I'm very curious to know why they're one of your favorites.
David Copperfield, I can relate a lot to certain elements in his life. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. It was one of those right book at the right time.
Yeah.
I was still working in machine shops. I just moved from Enid to Oklahoma City for more money and was realizing that, it wasn't the machine shop in Enid that I didn't like. It's this work in general that I don't like, and I really want to do something else.
Gotcha.
And so that kind of, David, being sent to work in the blacking factory early on, sure. I can relate to that. That feeling of being trapped and I've got to do this for money.
Yeah.
The fact that David was always kind of taken advantage of by others.
Sure.
I've been there. Mm-hmm. Being an introvert and all, sometimes it's kind of hard to say no to people that probably don't have your best interest at heart.
Being an extrovert, you run into the same thing. So,
yeah. And then, of course, in the book, David should marry Agnes. Agnes is the woman for David.
Right. No, I agree with that.
And instead he marries Dora. So, and when I read it, I was still at that first machine shop. And of course, you're not supposed to read while you're running your machines.
No.
But I would always have a paperback propped open with a big Allen wrench in the drawer of my toolbox. And I would start the machine and then I'd turn around and read and act like, I was cleaning tools or whatever. Yeah. But I read a lot of books that way.
You sound like the guy
at the shop in Enid.
Well, you sound like the guy from that Twilight Zone episode. It's one of my favorite ones.
Oh, yeah.
The guy in the bank.
Yeah, where the world ends.
Yes.
Yeah.
That episode devastates me more than just if I think about any other episode you could possibly imagine.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
So, which one of them?
Yeah, other than that, one of my favorites. Pardon me?
Which one of those two authors, do you have a book that's like, of those authors, is your favorite book to read by them?
By Wilson Rawls and Charles Dickens?
Uh-huh.
Probably Where the Red Fern Grows, because you've really got to be in the right mood for Dickens.
Yeah.
Because you got to remember he was basically getting paid by the word and publishing in serial form.
Oh, yeah.
So if you're not in the mood for a long Victorian novel with all of its descriptions, it's going to drive you mad.
Sure.
Where the Red Fern Grows is a nice, quick, easy read. The only downside is that I know that despite the fact I've read the book about 30 times, I am going to cry at the end.
Every single time.
There's that.
Every single time. And I've read it probably 10 times in my life, and I know it's coming, and I still sit there and bawl my eyes out every time.
The first time, my third grade teacher, Mrs. Newsom, she read it to the class. And when she got to the end, I mean, there's a room of like 25 kids sitting there crying.
Oh no.
Yeah. So I take my dogs to a dog park pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And we were at the park last night, and guess what kind of dog was there?
What?
A red bone hound.
Are you serious? That's so much fun. Yes. I love that.
They're so rare to see anywhere.
They're so
but yeah, there was
pretty.
One at the dog park.
Every time see one like on a dog show or something like that, they're always so pretty. I don't know if my husband's going to let me continue to watch the dog show, because right now my current obsession is a French bulldog. And every time I see one, I'm just like, I want one. So what are you currently working on now, writing-wise?
Well, I have 2 books going on.
Okay.
One is the 4th book in my Travels of Jacob Wolfe Western series.
Okay.
Which they're all really short books. They're supposed to be like the literary equivalent of an episode of Gunsmoke.
Oh, fun.
Or Rawhide, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. It's about a young bounty hunter who left his home in Kentucky to go to San Antonio with a woman that he thought was in love with him. And then it turned out that she was really just using him for company on the trail.
Sure.
And she was in love with a rich guy already in San Antonio. So he bought a brand new pistol and holster and an old nag of a horse and set out on his own, just wanting to go out in a blaze of glory so that she would miss him.
Okay.
And
that actually sounds really interesting. He
encounters some bad guys. His first bad guys, he gets lucky and kills them. And, excuse me, he takes the best horse and just rides on into town. Well, pretty soon the sheriff comes looking for him, wanting to know who's riding that horse.
Right.
And it turns out that an actual bounty hunter had found the bodies and brought him in for the reward. So the sheriff puts this young guy in the company of this massive black man who is a bounty hunter.
Okay.
And makes him his apprentice.
Oh, fun.
And so the first 3 books are Jacob working as the apprentice for Jerome Freeman.
Okay.
And I really like their dynamic together. But, the goal all along was to have Jacob set out on his own. So I had to come up with a way for them to separate. But I couldn't kill off Jerome. So in the 4th book, Jacob is out on his own for the first time.
Okay.
So I'm working on that. And my second memoir, the first memoir I did was about teaching. This one is about writing, and it's called How to Fail as an Author. And it is about how I've been writing for 40 years and am not yet a household name, and I'm not, filthy rich. So
one of my favorite, there's a video by Leslie Jones where she did a bit either on Saturday Night Live or The Daily Show. I cannot remember. And it's one where she talks about, don't give up on your dreams, because Michael Jordan was released from his team and Oprah Winfrey was fired and all of these different people didn't do things until they were like in their 40s and 50s. I mean, it took me 45 years to start my bookshop. So I wish that we had the intelligence, and not even so much intelligence, but the wisdom of our 40s when we were younger, because I think that we would stop worrying over the dumb stuff that we realized never mattered, and we could actually focus on the things that do matter, because I feel like sometimes we waste so much time when we could be doing the thing that we're meant to be doing.
Oh, I agree. You know, I mean, I started writing soon after high school.
Yeah. What kicked that off for you?
It was my high school creative writing teacher. I never even thought about it until I took her class. Okay. And I took her class because a friend told me it was an easy A. And I got in there, and it was an easy A, but only because she was a great teacher and I enjoyed writing.
I love that.
I found out that I did really like it, and she encouraged me and told me I was actually pretty good at it, which is funny because, I mean, as I was writing this memoir, I'm looking back at some of my early stuff. Like, she hosted a poetry contest every year.
Okay.
And I got second place. So I look back at that poem and think, oh my gosh, this is awful. But she encouraged it.
I was talking to a friend of mine about writing papers because she's young. And so she was writing a paper for one of her high school classes. And I told her, I said, I look back at the papers that I wrote in high school thinking that I was such hot shit. And I look back at the ones in high school and I have this, oh my God, what was wrong with me? Why did I make an A on this paper? And then I got to college and you can definitely tell that my writing style and my skill had gotten much better. So I think that's really interesting that you say that, because obviously when you start writing, you have no idea what you're doing. And then as you get older and you get more of a rhythm going, like I've got a friend, Zoe, who is going to be on the podcast at some point. And did you ever watch the show Pushing Daisies?
No, I didn't.
Okay. So Pushing Daisies was it was a 2-season show right before the writer strike, and it ended because of the writer strike. It was a disaster. But the show was absolutely genius because everything was hyper color. And I say all this to say that the speaking style of the characters had this very like rhythmic pattern to it. It was rapid fire, and it was adult words, but they were used very creatively. You know what I mean? And so Zoe writes that way. And so the first time I picked up a book of hers, it was kind of like, why does she write this? This is so weird. But then when I figured out, I know what she's doing. This is hilarious. I loved it. And it made me love her writing style. And so when we did book club with her this weekend, I asked her about that. And she said that's just she very hard patterned it after Pushing Daisies because she really thought that was awesome. And I went back and I read In the Woods trying to figure out which chapter was yours and which one was Carrie's. And I can't figure it out. But I really think it's interesting that different writers take different approaches to their writing style. And you can tell sometimes from one book, like if you're reading a series, one book to the next, that, they get their feet going and they, I think that I'm really excited to read the second book of you and Carrie's. Like, I'm super pumped because I enjoyed that story so much.
Oh, good. I can tell you, I wrote the chapters from the boys' point of view.
You did?
But then, of course, we both edited each other. Sure. So hopefully, I'm glad you can't necessarily tell.
No, I can't.
Because I think that would be a real distraction.
I think it sometimes is, and I think it sometimes isn't. It really depends on whether it's extremely purposeful in doing that or not. So, like I read one book called Bad Summer People, and every single chapter was written from the perspective of a different person. And so the writing styles were very different, and it was intentional. Every chapter had a different kind of voice, and it was done very intentionally. Yeah. And it was, at first, you're right. It would have kind of thrown you out of the book. But when you realize it was done intentionally because each person had a different way of speaking or a different way of telling their side of the story, whatever, it was, so I think it can be a double-edged sword, your writing style, because sometimes you can have that different kind of style. And other times I've read books where I've tried to read it and I can't. I can't stick with it.
Yeah.
Like, what's the person? I always forget this. So you've got the I did this and I did this and I said this, which is fine. And then you've got the they and he and she. But the I am going to do this and I'm going to do this and I am going to say this. And I think it's second person. Oh, my God. It drives me crazy. And I cannot read books that do that.
Yeah. Well, I know when I first teamed up with Carrie, the big thing in YA is first person present tense. Mm-hmm. And that it blew my mind trying to write that way.
Really?
At first. I can do it now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I was used to, third person, if not omniscient, but, through the perspective of one character.
Sure.
So that was a big change for me.
How do you think you're writing?
As far as the voice.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No.
As far as the voices go in writing with Carrie, since the two characters are together most of the time, I think it's important that you can't really tell who wrote what because, I have to write dialogue for Carrie's character and she has to write dialogue for mine. Mm-hmm. And of course, we would go through and, well, he wouldn't say it exactly like this. It'd be like this.
Yeah.
But overall, I think it blends really well.
How do you think that your writing style has changed from when you first started writing to now being a seasoned writer?
Well, this is definitely one of the things I address in my book that I'm working on.
Okay.
I am using grammar correctly. I know as an English teacher, that's got to be kind of a shock, but I was not the best student in high school. Mm-hmm. I only went to the high school in the morning, and then I went to a VOTEC in the afternoon.
Okay.
To learn to be an auto body repairman, which you can see how well that served me.
I mean,
so basically, I did what I needed to do to graduate.
Sure.
In a class of like 460, I was right in the middle. Mm-hmm. And grammar was not something that I felt was all that important.
Sure.
Until, I wanted to become a writer and I got rejection after rejection after rejection and no explanation why. Until finally the editor of some little horror magazine, and unfortunately I've lost all these notes in the divorce, but he told me, you've got a lot of grammar problems in your writing. For instance, you're using seen where you should use saw.
Okay.
And that it opened up my mind. And my thought there was, you can hear that I have quite the Okie twang. And I thought the word saw was just, way too country. So seen had to be the correct word.
Sure.
I seen the fish jump out of the river, not I saw the fish jump out of the river.
Yeah.
So I bought a book called A New Guide to Better Grammar or Better English. Uh-huh. And I read that and had to teach myself stuff that, teachers have tried to teach me for 12 years and I just ignored it. And that's probably the biggest change is just, understanding the rules. But other than that, finding your voice. Shara was my first published novel. Yeah. But it was the 7th one I wrote.
Okay.
So, I had 6 books where maybe the plots weren't so terrible bad, but I didn't have a voice. Uh-huh. And so the writing wasn't as good. And I think since Shara was published, I've done even better. Go ahead.
What would you say to someone who is trying to find their voice, who wants to write and has stories, but doesn't quite know how doesn't necessarily have a voice per se?
The only way to get there is to write. You've got to write your way into it. Yeah. A lot of times I feel like young writers try to get pretentious. They want to use words that they would not ordinarily use. Mm-hmm. And I think if you just relax and tell the story like you would tell it to a friend. Yeah. Think of a friend that you'd like to talk to and just write the story the way you'd tell it to that person. And that's advice that you hear from a lot of other writing coaches is
sure.
You can't just write for everybody.
Right.
You've got to pick a person. That is your audience. And I really think that's a really great piece of advice.
Well, I work for the Book Publishing Academy, and I am one of the accountability managers, and I tell people all the time, because I heard it at one of our conferences, you're not writing your book for you. You are writing your book for someone else to read that and go, oh my God, that's me. This is me right here. Like I had that experience with John Green's Turtles All the Way Down, because it's about a girl who has OCD and some other mental health issues. And I got diagnosed with anxiety and depression and PTSD right about the same time. And I was having trouble articulating the worry that is in my head that just gets just ridiculous scenarios going. And so in the first chapter of the book, the girl talks about her worry spirals, and the way she wrote, described it. I was like, oh my God, that's what my brain does. And I remember immediately running into my husband going, read this chapter right here, because this is my brain right here. And it was the first time I've ever seen it articulated. And it was just, oh my God, it's not just me. And so I always tell people, somebody's going to read what you wrote and, oh my God, it's not just me. And so I always say you're not writing it for you. You're writing it for somebody else.
That's right.
And it's one of the things that I love about literature is because no matter what's going on in your life, you will find a book somewhere that's going to feel like someone gets you.
Yes. Yes.
Is there a book out right now that you would love to have turned into a TV series or a movie?
You mean of my books?
Your books, books in general, because I'm always one of those. I love when books get turned into movies as long as they're done right, because sometimes it's like, what in the hell? Did you read the book? And then there's others like, that was beautiful. Like, what's the, oh gosh, now I can't think of it. I think To Kill a Mockingbird, fantastic adaptation. Like,
yes,
but then
and that's despite the fact they leave out a lot of my favorite scenes.
Right, exactly. Like, but then there's other stuff that you go in and watch it and you just kind of go, did you read the book?
Right. Yeah, I think of The Book Thief, which I love that book so much. And I cried like a baby at the end. And the movie is good, but it's not there, it just doesn't have the impact.
Sure.
As far as other books, of course I would love to see my Werewolf Saga adapted for the screen.
That would be awesome.
And it's up to 4 books plus 2 kind of extra books.
Sure.
Other than that, I've really been big into Ivan Doig and Wallace Stegner lately.
Now, what do they write?
They write about the American West mostly.
I love stuff like
Doig
that.
has, Doig has a series that is set in. He's got a few series, and he writes about Montana, which is where he lives.
Love that.
And so I am constantly on a quest for a book in the vein of John Steinbeck's East of Eden.
Okay.
Which, another one of my favorites.
Sure.
And I found one in Doig's. Well, I am, yeah. Ivan Doig has a book called Dancing at the Rascal Fair.
I've seen that book, but I haven't read it yet.
It's actually the second in the series, but chronologically it's the first.
Okay.
And it is one of those epic family tales. 2 best friends come to America from Scotland.
Okay.
And they settle in an area full of Scots there in Montana.
Sure.
And one of them falls in love with a woman.
Okay.
And she marries somebody else. Oh. So the best friend brings his sister over. And so the guy marries the sister, but he never really loves her. He's only in love with the other woman.
Sure.
And of course that causes problems.
Yeah.
But it is so good.
We read.
And then with Stegner.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, Wallace Stegner is another author of the West. He was also a big conservationist.
Okay.
And one of the things I love about his work, in one of his books, he says something like, it's a quiet story of ordinary people.
Oh.
And a lot of his books are like that. Yes. They are like that, but yet we're fascinated by the ordinary life, and whose life really is ordinary. I mean, your life, for example, is totally different than mine.
Right.
You know, I'd love to, like, you know, sit there and watch what you do in a day.
Oh God.
So, but he's got two really big books. He won the Pulitzer for Angle of Repose.
Okay.
Which I think would be a difficult but fascinating movie if done right.
Right.
And then The Big Rock Candy Mountain is a fictionalized account of his early life, which is something else. He had quite the father.
I love that.
But yeah, those are some books I'd like to see.
So I read Where the Crawdads Sing, and cannot express the depth of my love for that book. And it was unexpected because I wasn't sure it was going to be for me, but I'm a character growth person. And so then when I heard they were doing the movie, it was like, oh God, you know, because how are you going to translate the beauty of this story onto film without ruining it? But I think they did an amazing job, because I went with my friend Jess, read it, and we went to go watch it. And I literally went in there with dread, and it was beautifully done.
Yes.
And that reminds me of one of those stories, like where you talk about a very quiet, ordinary life. And I mean, she does amazing things in the book, but her life is small and quiet. And, you know, it's not lonely, but it's solitary. You know what I mean? So I love what you mean about having a very, you know, normal, or like Lonesome Dove is that way too. When you consider the two best friends who decide to go from, Texas to, I think it's Montana or Colorado.
Montana. Yeah.
And that friendship between the two men is just, and then when you watch what happened, oh my God, it just, yes. Oh, God. And I watched the movie.
That book made me so mad.
Oh my God, it made me
because at the end, Carl doesn't acknowledge his son.
Just, yeah. And I love a good Western. Like, I've been really into Yellowstone in 1883 and 1923. And then I watched it's the one he did about the sheriff. And he was a black marshal in a time when that wasn't done. And it's done by Taylor Sheridan.
Was it Bass Reeves?
Yeah, that's it. Bass Reeves. I really love that.
Yeah, Bass Reeves was here in Oklahoma.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Far out.
Yeah, he was a marshal and then a town sheriff in Oklahoma.
I didn't know that. My stepfather, who was 30 years older than my mom, his father was a town sheriff in a western town. And there's a picture somewhere of him in full sheriff uniform with his big hat and the cowboy boots and the badge. And I just remember that, thinking that is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Bass Reeves' life was it was so fascinating. I mean, he had to arrest his own son.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And he himself was accused of murder.
I saw that in the series. They covered that.
Yeah, I mean, his life had so much that you could make a movie from.
I wonder what it is with us, like just people in general, and our fascination with the American West, because there are so many stories about that period of time that are just, I could watch every single one of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with, you know, that American spirit, as they call it, of just the freedom.
Yeah.
I mean, you're in the West. Yeah, there's laws, but there's not very many laws. You're free to do a lot of stuff. Justice doesn't take as long as it does in the civilized world. And just the feeling that if you really want it, you can make it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of us, you're living in the city, working a 9-to-5 job, we don't feel that.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, we've lost the desire. Well, not the desire, but we've lost this ability to find jobs that make us happy. Because we've got into this trap of, I have to have a job so that I can pay bills and eat, but I don't necessarily have to like my job. And I did jobs I hated for years. And then, I mean, that's how I got the bookshop started was, and I've told this story before, that my friend Tammy, I was talking to her on my 45th birthday, and I was having a pity party because I'd gotten laid off. And she said, well, you're going to take this opportunity to start your bookshop, or you're just going to keep taking jobs you can't stand. And I was like, you're absolutely right. And she gave me the ass kicking that I really desperately needed. So I think that I agree with what you said about, you know, the different laws and things, and there were all these opportunities. I think we've lost that passion to find our own opportunities because we just settle because we need to survive. So we just settle.
Yeah. Yeah. We turn 16, we want a car, so we get whatever job we can. And then even if we go to college and get a degree and manage to get a job in the field we got our degree in, which isn't all that common, really.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we're just settled in. Then we got a house, so we got to make house payments. We got to make utility payments and all that.
Yeah.
I recently lost another job, and I was a few weeks away from selling my house and living in a van. I'm just taking up the nomad life. Because pretty much all of my bills are associated with the house.
That's crazy. I know people that do it. I've got a couple friends that they do it, and they're really happy.
Exactly. I bought the van. It's sitting out front.
Oh,
but I did get another job. So
I look at my house and just the accumulation of books that I have in my house.
Yes.
I would not be able to do that. I wouldn't. Yeah. I'm not giving.
That's the thing.
Away.
I mean, I would have to get a storage unit for the books. I mean, but then I think, none of my kids are really readers. And I'm just going to leave these books that they're going to have to get rid of eventually. So tell
them to give them to me. I'll take them. I'll make that really easy for them.
You better bring a truck.
I stop playing. I'll do it. Yeah. And so I looked at my bookshelf. I had to pack up my bookshelf yesterday because on Monday we're moving to our new storefront. And I was like, oh, it won't take that many boxes. I vastly miscalculated two things: the amount of time it was going to take me to pack up like 5 bookshelves, and the amount of boxes that it was going to take to pack up 5 bookshelves. I was like,
books are heavy.
They really are. But, like I sit up here and look at my office and I look at the bookshelves that I have for the books that you will pry out of my cold, dead hands. And it's just, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care if they weigh 500 pounds. These are the ones I'm not getting rid of.
I know I have books all over my house, and sometimes, I'm sitting in the living room thinking I really need to declutter and I need to reduce the number of books I've got. And in the past, I've done some major book purchases that I've deeply regretted.
Yes.
But see, I'm looking at the shelves and it's like, what would I get rid of? Well, okay, I didn't like that book.
Yeah.
But I can't get rid of this book or this book, and this book is signed by the author, and
exactly,
on and on. It's like,
well, so I
have a copy of Loaves and Doves signed by the author.
Developed a process for this. So I have a bookshelf in my bedroom, and every book that comes in the house goes on that bookshelf. And if I read it, it either goes up to the office where you'll pry it from my cold, dead hands, or it goes into the bookshop because it's like, okay, this is a good book, but.
Yeah. And see, I really wanted to open my own bookshop, which is why I wrote the Lost Pages bookshop bookstore that came out last year.
Yeah. That's on my list.
Yeah, it was the same thing. It's like, no, thank you. It was like, okay, I can take the books that I'm not deeply attached to, and that can be like my startup inventory.
Well, and I mean, that's how I started mine. Is Tammy brought over 3 books. And that is how I started my bookshop. So, I mean, do it. You ought to take your van and make it a traveling bookshop.
Oh, yeah. That would be fun.
There's a story that I wrote.
So last year,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Last year, there's the Oklahoma Writers Federation, which is the umbrella group in Oklahoma for all the writing clubs.
Okay.
And they have an annual contest.
Fun.
So last year, at their conference, Grady Hendrix was the guest of honor. And
how do I know who that is?
I was lucky enough. He's like the big name in horror right now. I'm blanking out. He also wrote Paperbacks from Hell, which was a study of the covers of 70s and 80s horror paperbacks.
I love those.
But he wrote like My Best Friend's Exorcism.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Now I know who that is. Okay. Yeah.
Horror story. Yeah. Okay. Really, really nice guy.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough that the Lost Pages bookstore was picked as one of the books that he would critique in front of a group. And he liked it. And I worked in a border store for about 9 months.
Sure.
And that's the extent of my bookstore experience other than as a customer. But apparently it was believable enough that he thought at one time I must have owned a bookstore.
Oh, I love that. Oh, yay.
It was a lot of fun to write. But during the writing of that book, I did go into an 18-month writer's block, just really, really deep depression.
Mm-hmm.
Job related, my marriage breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But
I hope that you're better now.
I mean, I am. After 18 months, it was like, am I still a writer, or is this chapter of my life over?
Yeah.
So I went through and I looked at the things I've been working on, and actually the thing closest to completion was a romance novel. And so I said, okay, I'm going to finish this. Sure. If I can finish this, I can get back into writing.
Sure.
And I did, and it was hard. I mean, it was so hard to get back into it because it had been so long.
Right.
But I finished it, and last year I think I published close to 10 books.
You and my friend Lloyd are making every other writer I know look bad, because you and Lloyd crank things out. And like Lloyd will post stuff. I'm working on my 4th book this year, and I plan to write 7,000 books this year. And it's just like, dude, I'm still working on one. So you and Lloyd, I don't know how y'all do that.
Well, I haven't repeated it this year. I haven't published anything. Well, yeah, I published the 3rd book in the Jacob Wolf series.
Okay.
I've got another book that I finished. It was my NaNoWriMo project for last year. It's called Sycamore Souls.
Okay.
And it's a literary novel that is almost women's fiction.
Nice.
And it's about a young woman who comes to Oklahoma from Wyoming when she meets a guy on a dating app.
Okay.
And they've been together for a while. She lives alone. Mm. They're not living together at this point.
Sure.
And she also went to the university in the town, which is based on my hometown of Eden, but I've changed the name and some details. But she meets his grandfather, who is a widower. And when the grandfather falls and breaks his hip, her boyfriend's family hires her to become the grandfather's live-in caretaker.
Okay.
And through that, as a child, she always moved around because her dad was in the military and he had a problem with women. And so he'd get in trouble and get transferred.
Sure.
So the book is all about her finding roots, putting down roots somewhere and becoming a part of the community. And the grandfather helps her do that.
I love that.
And I haven't published it yet because I did send it to an agent. I'm waiting to hear if that works out before I just go ahead and self-publish it. But this is a book that my mind keeps going back to. I want to live in that world. Mm-hmm. So there's not really room for a sequel, I don't think. But yeah, I really liked the world I created there, and I liked the characters. I
was going to ask you something. Now I forgot what it was. So, like, where do you get, I know what it was. Where do you get some of your inspiration, like, for your story ideas?
I wish I knew. I mean, the werewolf books, for instance, Shara Elaine Wellington, the main character, is basically a female version of me. Same initials. She's very introverted. She wishes for a way to express herself. She hates that she's always pushed around, that she can't say no, blah, blah, blah.
Sure.
And when she's offered the gift of lycanthropy, she finds her inner strength. Of course, she develops more problems.
Of course.
But yeah, that was me looking for a way to not be run over so much.
That's fantastic.
Lost Pages bookstore. Obviously, I've always wanted to run a bookstore, but the story is really about a guy who was a very famous fantasy author, and then he wasn't in a very good marriage, and he had an affair. That was discovered. His wife divorced him. Then his mom died. And so he just retreated to a small town in northwest Oklahoma and bought this bookstore that was about to go out of business. And it's been losing money since he had it, but he's been supplementing it with the little bit of royalties that have still been coming in. But he's totally blocked as an author. Every morning he goes and sits down and switches on his computer and looks at the sentence fragment that he wrote years and years and years ago, and he just can't keep going. And then his world gets turned upside down. But
sure.
Every book's main character is some facet of myself that has either been amplified or changed, and that has caused me some problems. I mean, my book, The Teacher, has become quite controversial.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a book about a teacher, obviously. He's a student council sponsor. He's very, very connected to his kids.
Sure.
He's divorced. His ex-wife and his daughter pretty much hate him, and they just see him as a source of money. And he pours all the love that he should give to his family into his students.
Sure.
And then one of the students becomes infatuated with him and starts manipulating social media to where it looks like they're having an affair.
Oh, God.
But he is having an affair with another teacher who is married to a state congressman. Well, eventually the administration finds out about the student's posts and calls that student in, and they go through her phone and they find a video that she secretly recorded of the teacher and his mistress in her room making out. And they don't want to risk losing their funding because the congressman is on the committee that funds the schools. So they fire him.
That's so.
And, teachers live paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah.
So he loses everything. The only place he has to go, the student texts him and says, "You can come live with me. My grandma says it's okay." That's her guardian.
Oh, my gosh.
So he goes there, and in this around 300-page novel, there's like one paragraph where this teacher in his 40s tries to convince himself to see this 18-year-old girl as a woman that he could be with. And when she reaches for him, he runs away, runs out of the house, goes to a lake and tries to commit suicide for the second time. Because that is preferable to sleeping with a student.
Sure.
But one of my former students decided that if I could write that, I must be a pedophile and a groomer.
No.
And posted on Facebook, contacted the Secretary of Education for the state, has contacted past employers telling them that I'm a problem.
Why would a student? I don't understand people. Like, I don't get why people.
I don't know.
That.
But people can't separate fact from fiction.
No, they cannot.
It's not common, but I have had people email me and ask me if I can turn them into werewolves because if I write about them, I must be one. It's like it's absurd.
Okay.
And this student was one of my advanced placement literature students and should know better.
Wow. Well, I mean, look what happened to Sting when he wrote that song, "Don't Sit So Close to Me." Is that the title?
Don't stand so close to me.
Yeah, that's it. I was like, I know I'm going to get flagged. Don't come for me. I'm sorry. It's Saturday or it's Sunday. I'm tired. But yeah, I mean, he was a teacher and he wrote that song, and it's one of my favorite songs, even though I can't recall the title right now. Yeah. But I mean, yeah. So, yeah. Well,
yeah. It's a crazy world.
Yes, it is. So like I got the idea for the one that I'm currently working on right now because I saw a post that I posted, as a post for my social media. What would happen if the main character fell in love with its reader? And so I'm writing the story. But like as I've gotten to a part where I'm like, okay, so I'm now to the main character in the book. And I'm trying to build that world. And for someone who's never done anything like that before, it's like, okay, how do I want, how much detail do I want to go into? How important is it? But yeah, it was so funny because somebody had said, I would really read that book. And I thought, yeah, that would be a good book. And I'm standing in the middle of Walmart and all of a sudden, I wonder how they would meet. Oh my God. And I pulled out my phone and started typing on my phone. And then when I got in my car, I put it on the where the Siri records it and literally voice recorded my idea the whole way home and then sat there. I was like,
yeah.
So I think it's really
that's such a good
when
feeling.
Ideas hit you and where they hit you.
Yes. Yeah.
So do you carry a notebook around with you in case an idea ever hits you?
No, because I have my phone.
I tell people
so I've done the same thing you've done. Yeah.
Have a piece of paper or have a notebook and a pen or something, some way to take a note because you never know when something's going to hit you. And it's like, that would be a really good story.
Yeah. Well, the Western book that I'm working on now, I had a dream this morning that I think is going to be one of the chapters.
Okay.
And it's weird that I was dreaming it because I really haven't worked on the book in quite a while because I've been working on the other one. But yeah, it was just in this book, he and some friends that he's meeting, they have to go after a big gang of bad guys.
Okay.
And in the dream, they are up on a hill in some bushes and they see a bunch of them. And he's telling the other guys, don't shoot yet. We're not close enough. And of course, somebody shoots.
Of course.
And it's unfolding in the dream, and they're out of range, and they're not hitting anybody. But now the bad guys know where they are, and there was another group of them that they didn't know about, and the bad guys ride up on them. Sure. And by this time, and in the dream, I guess I'm Jacob. And he turns and tries to shoot one with his Winchester rifle, and it's empty. And so they're being captured.
Oh, no.
And then my dog jumped up on the bed and woke me up. So I don't know how they got out of it. I'll have to figure that out myself.
Well, Steven, I really appreciate you sitting down with us today. We're almost out of time. Definitely appreciate you just chatting with me today about all your books. And like I said, most of your books are on my reading list. So I'm really looking forward to discussing them in the future. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, yeah, good. Well, thank you guys for listening, and thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of The Spine Bookcast Chronicles of a Bookshop. As always, happy reading, and we will catch you next time.